That's unthinkable to me. That you have an opportunity in your lifetime to be a professional, that you think about quitting. See, you don't quit it, and you don't quit in sports. You retire. You don't get to quit. It's not an option. See, someone told me that a long time ago. That ain't even an option. And the person told me that, he ain't here anymore. He died. This is what's great about sports. This is what the greatest thing about sports is. You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it. That's the great thing about sports. You play to win. And I don't care if you don't have any wins. You go play to win. When you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Randall Handles Football Podcast. I am your host, Randall Tebus. So today we're going to take a look at the playoff seeding structure, and we're going to go over my predictions for the eventual Super Bowl champion in the 2020 NFL season. So it's an exciting show. It's something that a lot of people are interested in. And so without further ado, let's actually take a look at it. The first thing to consider when looking at the playoff seeding, there's 6 teams from each conference that make the playoffs. You have 4 division winners. You have a winner from the West, the North, the South, and the East. That's both in the NFC and the AFC. And then you have 2 wildcard teams from each conference. So those first 4 division winners are ranked somewhere between the numbers 1 and number 4 in terms of seeding. The number 1 seed and the number 2 seed both get first round byes in the playoffs. Now, what this means is they get a week off at the beginning of the playoffs to prepare. Because they had the best record, they get this extra week off, almost like an added bye week, just at the end of their season as they prepare for their next opponent. This is a huge advantage for most teams, as it's one less game that they have to face in order to get to the Super Bowl. Now, if we look at last season's 2 Super Bowl teams, the runner-up 49ers and the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, both of these teams had the first round byes. So as we see, this is a huge advantage for teams that actually do have Super Bowl aspirations, as all teams really do. Now, the 2 wildcard teams from each conference are given to the 2 remaining teams after all 4 of the division winners are selected, the 2 teams with the best remaining record. Now, sometimes it turns out that one or even both of those wildcard teams have a better overall record than one of those division winners. In that case, it still doesn't matter. Those teams are still going to be delegated to being a wildcard team. They're still going to have to play one of those. They're still going to have to travel all throughout the playoffs, right? So if you're a division winner, you automatically get to host or have a home game in the playoffs. All the wildcard teams will have to play on the road if they actually want to get to the Super Bowl. So there's definitely advantages for winning your division and disadvantages for making it to a wildcard team. But ultimately, every team's goal is to get to the playoffs, and every team's goal is to win a Super Bowl. So if you're, a team like the Carolina Panthers from last year, you're happy to get into a wild card spot, right? Your goal, your aim is to get to the playoffs. If you're the Detroit Lions or, the Miami Dolphins or the Pittsburgh Steelers from last season who are just one game away from making the playoffs, you're happy to get into a wild card team and ultimately just at least make it to the playoffs. So that's a little overview. So like I had said, just to wrap it up, there's 6 teams that make it to the playoffs from each conference. You have 4 division winners and 2 wildcard teams. The 2 teams with the best overall record, the top 2 teams that are division winners, do get a first round bye in the playoffs. So let's take a look at my predictions for the upcoming season in terms of seeding and where teams will land. Starting out with the NFC, we have the two teams that I believe will have a first round bye going into the playoffs. And that is the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So as I've mentioned before, I do like the Dallas Cowboys offense this year. I think they're going to be an exciting team to watch. They're definitely going to put up a lot of numbers. Dak Prescott is still playing under the franchise tag, so he's still in a prove it kind of mode. If he wants to become the $40 million per year quarterback. And of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneers with all of their offseason moves, bringing in Tom Brady, bringing in Rob Gronkowski. I think that their offense is definitely going to be exciting as well. For as good of offense the Buccaneers had last season, imagine the same thing this season without the 30 interceptions that Jameis Winston threw last season. So I think they're going to be their division winners. They're going to beat out the Saints. So I think it's going to be a 1-2 punch in the NFC South between the Buccaneers and the Saints. The next two division winners I have are the San Francisco 49ers and the Green Bay Packers. Now, you'll notice that, I have the Cowboys ranked at number 1, the Buccaneers at number 2, the 49ers at number 3, and the Green Bay Packers at number 4. So, the teams with the 2 first-round byes are the 1 and the 2. The Cowboys are going to finish with the best record in the NFC this season. And I have that the Buccaneers and the Saints are going to both tie with a record of 12 wins and 4 losses. Now, the Buccaneers are chosen to be the division winners because they have the better head-to-head record and because they have the better division record. So when it comes to tiebreakers to determine seedings, there's really 4 criteria that you look at. The first thing you look at is head-to-head wins. Which team beat the other teams more? So, if we're looking at the Saints and the Buccaneers, I have the Buccaneers beating the Saints twice, and so that's what gives them this division crown. Suppose they split their head-to-head wins or they'd never even played each other during the season. The next thing we would look at is the division record. Which team had a better record in their own division? Each team plays a division opponent 6 times throughout the year. So that's the next criteria that's looked at, is who has the better division record. If the division records are the same, the third thing that you look at is the better conference record. Each team plays 12 conference games. And so it's out of those 12 games, whichever team had the better record in those 12 games would have the higher seeding. And lastly, suppose that those seedings were the exact same, or those conference records were the exact same. The fourth thing that they look at in determining seeding for playoffs and for draft order is the strength of schedule. And that is, did you play a relatively easy schedule or did you play a relatively hard schedule? If you played a harder schedule and you still finished with a better record, you're going to get the higher seeding versus if you played a weaker schedule, you're going to get the lower seeding. Okay, now it's not often that 2 teams are going to have an identical strength of schedule. But if that does happen as well, that they just happen to be the same in their strength of schedule, then there's a lot of other little subtleties, nuances that they start to look at, such as, who scored more points in the season, who allowed less points in the season. So, it's really those 4 things that are looked at to determine the playoff seeding if there is a tiebreaker. So like I said, I have that my 4 division winners are the Dallas Cowboys, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Green Bay Packers. My 2 wildcard teams this year are going to be the New Orleans Saints and Seattle Seahawks. Now, just taking a look at this, there's 2 teams that I have making it to the playoffs this year that did not make the playoffs last season. And that is the 2 teams that are going to have finished with the best record, the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So from last season, the Philadelphia Eagles won the NFC East, and the Cowboys missed out on the playoffs. And for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they were not in the playoffs, and instead the Minnesota Vikings were the team that had the wild card spot. So that's just where these little changes happen. Now, like I said, I do have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints finishing with an identical record of 12 wins and 4 losses. But as I said before, I believe Tampa Bay will beat New Orleans twice this season, and that's what's going to give them the division crown instead of the Saints. So just continuing on, just to see how the rest of the NFC stacks up, I have the Minnesota Vikings, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Arizona Cardinals all being what are called bubble teams. The teams that are close to being in the playoffs that are just barely going to be on the outside looking in. So those three teams are going to be those bubble teams that have a chance. If a few more passes would have went their ways, a few more tips, then they probably would have been in the playoffs. But ultimately, those teams are going to miss out on the playoffs. And then we start to get to the bottom of the barrel teams. The Atlanta Falcons at number 10, the Los Angeles Rams at number 11, the Carolina Panthers at number 12. And actually, as a matter of fact, I have that the Arizona Cardinals at number 9, the Atlanta Falcons at number 10, the Rams at 11, and Panthers at 12, all finished with identical records. But again, it just comes down to all those tie-breaking procedures. And it just turns out that it ends up that this is the way the seeding goes. So even though the Cardinals are at number 9, the Panthers are at number 12, they have the same identical record at 7 wins and 9 losses. But just with the tiebreakers, the way that goes out, the Panthers are going to be put lower than the Cardinals. And so continuing, at number 13, I have the Detroit Lions. At number 14, the Chicago Bears. At number 15, the Washington Redskins. And at number 16, the New York Giants. And so this wraps up the entire NFC conference. Like I said, the first 6 teams are all of the playoff teams. And the rest of this seeding will just be used to determine the draft order when it comes to the NFL draft for the 2021 season. Okay. So let's take a look at the AFC now, at the other conference, the American Football Conference now. The 2 teams that I have finishing in the first 2 spots that ultimately will get that first round bye in the playoffs is number 1, the Baltimore Ravens, and number 2, the Buffalo Bills. Now, it's a bit of a surprise that the Bills are up there. I think that they are going to be a bit of a surprise team. They're not going to sneak up on anybody, but I think it's going to be a surprise that they do finish at that high of a ranking. I think that they're pretty solidified to win their division. The New England Patriots are the team that has owned the AFC East for the past 2 decades. But like I said before, with Tom Brady gone and Jarrett Stidham as set to be the starting quarterback for the Patriots, I don't think they're going to be a competitive team. So I have the Bills winning the division. I have them owning their division, and I have them earning a first-round bye as the number 2 seed. As it turns out, the Buffalo Bills at number 2 finished with the exact same record as the team I have at number 3, the Kansas City Chiefs. And my last division winner in the AFC South is the Indianapolis Colts at number 4. So as I spoke on before, the Bills and the Chiefs I have finishing with an identical record of 12 wins and 4 losses. But because the Bills and the Chiefs do play each other, and I have that the Bills are going to beat the Chiefs, the Bills are given the benefit of the doubt, and they are given the higher ranking due to that head-to-head matchup. And so for the Chiefs to make it back to the Super Bowl and to be a back-to-back Super Bowl champion, they're going to have to go the long route of playing 4 games to ultimately be crowned that Super Bowl champion. So it's a bit of a tougher stretch for the Chiefs, but again, they're a team that's definitely poised to be able to repeat, right? They have a potent offense. And so the last 2 teams that I have for a wild card in the AFC are number 5, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and number 6, the Houston Texans. Now, looking at this, again, there's 2 teams here, 2 new teams to the playoffs in the 2020 season that did not make the playoffs in the previous season, in the 2019 season, and that is the Indianapolis Colts and the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, so I mentioned it before. The Steelers were a bubble team last season. They were on the cusp of making it to the playoffs, but ultimately fell just short. I think the big difference between this year and last year was now with the return of Ben Roethlisberger, their quarterback. I think that will be enough to get them into the playoffs, but ultimately as a wild card team. And with the Indianapolis Colts, I think they were a good team last season. Of course, they had Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback, and I think he was a decent bridge quarterback. They started out the season very hot. I think started out with a record of 5-1 or 4-2 or something like that, but ultimately lost like 8 of their last 9 games to end the season, and finished short of the playoffs last season. So in comes Phillip Rivers to take over the quarterback position to stabilize that, and I think that'll be enough for them to actually win their division, and make it back to the playoffs. So the 2 teams that I have missing from the playoffs this year that were in it last season are the New England Patriots and the Tennessee Titans. So all in all, I have 4 teams that make it to the playoffs that are new members of the playoffs this season that didn't make it last season. So, I think that'll be interesting to see. So looking at the bubble teams in the AFC, I have number 7, the Denver Broncos, number 8, the Cleveland Browns, and number 9, the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Steelers and the Texans both finished with an identical record of 9 wins and 7 losses. But again, because of their tie-breaking procedures, the Steelers get the 5 seed and the Texans get the 6 seed. The Broncos and the Browns, the same thing happens. Both of those teams finish with a record of 8 wins and 8 losses. But due to tie-breaking procedures, the Broncos are put ahead of the Browns. And the Miami Dolphins finish with a record of 7 wins and 9 losses, and they finish as the 9th seed. Continuing, number 10, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, 11, the New England Patriots, and number 12, the Cincinnati Bengals. All three of these teams finish with an identical record of 6 wins and 10 losses. But again, as I've mentioned before, due to tie-breaking procedures, this is how it plays out. Continuing, number 13, the Tennessee Titans, and number 14, the Las Vegas Raiders. I have both of those teams finishing with a record of 5 wins and 11 losses. That's right, Raiders fans. I'm sorry, with your brand new stadium, with your beautiful stadium, with your probably going to be empty stadium this year, you guys finished pretty low. So hopefully next season for the Raiders, the Pro Bowl is going to be in Las Vegas this season, so maybe they'll have a bunch of members of the Pro Bowl. So at least there's something going on for Las Vegas. And of course, rounding out the AFC, we have the bottom feeders, the bottom dwellers, the teams that are going to get picked on this season. The New York Jets at number 15 and the Los Angeles Chargers at number 16. I do have the Jets finishing with a record of 5 wins and 11 losses as well. And then the Chargers ultimately finish with a record of 4 wins and 12 losses to round out the AFC. So once again, those top 6 teams, the Ravens, Bills, Chiefs, Colts, Steelers, and Texans, are going to be the 6 playoff teams in this coming season. And of course, the 2 top seeds, the Ravens and the Bills, will have their first round bye. The 2 lower seeds, the Steelers and the Texans at 5 and 6, will be the 2 wildcard teams going into this season. So now, without further ado, let's look at my eventual Super Bowl champions. So in the wildcard week, I had the number 4 seed plays the number 5 seed, and the number 3 seed plays the number 6 seed. So on the NFC side, we have the Packers taking on the Saints. Of course, the Packers being the home team there. And we have the 49ers taking on the Seahawks as the 3 versus 6. And of course, the 49ers being the home team there and the Seahawks being the road team. I think that the 49ers will do enough to handle the Seattle Seahawks, especially with them being the home team. And I think the 49ers get the victory there. And in the first game, the Packers and the Saints, I think that, even though the Saints were a wild card team, the Saints really are the better team. They just happen to be in the division with the Buccaneers. And so I have the Saints beating the Packers in wild card weekend and advancing to the second round. Over on the AFC side, again, the 4 versus 5 game is going to be the Colts and Steelers. Of course, the Indianapolis Colts are going to be the home team. And the 3 versus 6 is going to be the Chiefs versus the Texans. And of course, the Chiefs are going to be the home team there. There, I have the Chiefs beating the Texans. If you remember from last season, that was a very interesting game between the Chiefs and the Texans in the playoffs. The Texans ran out to like a 21-0 lead in the first quarter or early into the second quarter. And ultimately, the Chiefs came storming back and ended up blowing out the Texans. So I don't know if it's going to be like that, but it is going to be an exciting game to see Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson duke it out again. But I have the Chiefs coming away with the victory there. And in the first game, the Colts and the Steelers, I have the Steelers edging out the Colts in the playoffs and advancing to the second round. And so we have the Saints and Cowboys playing each other, with the Saints prevailing in that game, beating the number 1 seed Cowboys to advance to the championship game, and the number 2 seed Buccaneers taking on the number 3 seed 49ers. And again, I have the road team winning there as well. I have the 49ers advancing past the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and into the NFC Championship game as well. Over on the AFC side, the Steelers take on the Ravens in a battle of the AFC North, just in the playoffs, and I have the Ravens prevailing there and advancing to the championship game. And the number 2 seed Bills take on the previous winner, the Kansas City Chiefs, and I have the Chiefs prevailing there to set up a very nice, a very exciting championship weekend with the Saints versus the 49ers and the Ravens versus the Chiefs. Ultimately, I think the 49ers do enough to beat the Saints, and the Ravens do enough to beat the Chiefs. Now, earlier in the season, I had the 49ers traveling to New Orleans and eventually losing to the Saints I think that was in like week 8 of the NFL season. Well, now the 49ers, are going to be the home team. And I think the 49ers get it done against the Saints. The Saints have just been a team that collapses in these kinds of games in the recent years. So I think the 49ers do enough to go to this event, to be a repeat Super Bowl participant. And over on the AFC side, I think the Ravens avenged their early exit loss last season, and the Ravens do beat the Chiefs to advance to the Super Bowl as well. This is going to be a repeat of the Super Bowl back in 2008 when Joe Flacco led the Ravens to the Super Bowl, and of course Colin Kaepernick was the quarterback of the 49ers. Not quite a repeat because this time I have the San Francisco 49ers coming out on top and being the eventual Super Bowl champions. That's right, 2020 is the 49ers year. So let me know what you guys think. What are your guys' playoff predictions? Who are your Super Bowl predictions and previews? Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this was very educational for you guys. And so I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you.
I don't care who you play, whether it's a high school team, a junior college team, a college team, much less an NFL team. When you turn the ball over 5 times, 4 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, 3 others in field position to set up touchdowns, you ain't gonna beat anybody I just talked about. Anybody. All right? And that was a disgraceful performance, in my opinion. We threw that game. We gave it away by doing that. We gave them the friggin' game. In my opinion, that sucked. What's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.